class workshop on basic metallurgy, the ID of junkyard steel, how they do it, and basic heat treating. So, my name's Andy Hight. I originally went to farrier school in 1980, so we did cold horseshoeing in that class. But I got a little introduction to hot work, and that spurred my interest. And then did that for a while, and ended up going back to school and graduated in '85, so it only took me 11 years to get my bachelor's degree, and went into the power industry and has been in power generation ever since. And I just retired in '83, but got my hands dirty, so I was in the field all the time, and metallurgy interests me, and that's what we do in the power industry. So there's, whether it's boilers, steam turbines, gas turbines, you get exposed to a lot of different things and have to know a lot of different things. So that's kind of my background. Forgot one little thing here already. So in 1987, so in 80 was in farrier school, and then 87, when I finally could afford it, they went to John Campbell School and took a class in basic blacksmithing with Noel Putnam. And the first thing we did was heat treat hammers. We had to stand in line and get a hammer, and then unfortunately I was slow on the uptake, so he had 1,000-gram hammers, and then he had 1,500-gram hammers, and by the time I got up in line, I was stuck with a 15. This is a 1,000, and I could barely heave that thing, and it was a 2-week class, and by the time it was over, I was beat. And that was back in my younger years. But the first thing he had us do was upset the peen on these and upset the phase on these and heat treat them. And this was successful at the time. Then I got home, and I was unsuccessful at the time. So, and also in those, it may apply to some of you here. Funds were very tight, so a hammer like that was, I had to save up a while to buy the hammer, and then you're sawing the handle off, and you're going to go heat treat this thing. If it doesn't work out, that's the end of that. So it's important. So there were things that I was exposed to that gave me a bad taste of heat treat. And really, the goals of this presentation is provide all the attendees with this handout. And what this handout is a compilation of information from all kind of sources. So I did not invent anything here. I probably in copyright infringement of everybody, but it was my intention that if you can gather up the information in one spot, it's a way easier to be successful. And that's why these books were put together. And you need to, we've got to, my other intent here is to get you guys familiar with how to find things in this book, because we're going to be flipping back and forth, like the spark test. So that's why you have Post-it notes to maybe help you find these pages faster when we go back and forth to this. References are on page 37. I brought some of them with me. I would highly recommend New Edge of the Anvil. That's got a bulk of information that's really super helpful. And when I first started out, the only thing I could afford was this book. Guess what's wrong in this? Heat treating. He gives a chapter on heat treating. And I remember I lived on a ranch out in northwestern Colorado and was working at the power plant, and I was just, came back. I'm trying to, self-taught. I'm trying to learn this stuff, and it just wasn't making sense. I could have swore this doesn't mean this. It means that. I don't know. Anyway, I used that as a reference as I was compiling information, and that's what the problem was. This guy refers to tempering when he's hardening. Wrong. So you've got to be familiar with the terms. You've got, you know, this is another, if you do your own mechanics, you do industrial work, this is the Bible, good to have. This Fundamentals of Metallurgy, this is a good book, really simple, but it lays out the concepts like in a teaching format, and it's much easier to understand the concepts. And I am not a metallurgist, I'll tell you that right now. BMG, if you buy your steel down in Richmond, they publish this book about what steels they offer, and like hot rolled bars, you can get a description of their composition and their properties right out of their book. So use the references as you find them, collect them over time, read them, and that's why I'm hoping the goal here is that you just don't put this up on a shelf and forget about it. Take it out in your shop, get it dirty, ruin it, whatever, but it has some good information in it. And don't worry, today we're not going over word for word. So we'll be here till next Tuesday. Okay. Yeah. So we're trying to get some participation with everybody. Yeah. And, you know, paraphrasing this guy, I don't know if you're on YouTube, I used to watch this guy, Chuck E. He's a welding kid. Well, he got so many hate mail or whatever he calls guys on the internet, hate guys, that he gave it up and went to farming. But anyway, he would say, if you ain't breaking it, you ain't making it. Well, that's a fact. If you're not trying, you're never going to learn what the failures are, and when you don't learn what the failures are, you're just extremely lucky, or you had a good teacher somewhere along the line.
You know what failed on the hammer that head that you took home way back in the day?
What happened? Why did it crack? No, I don't remember. That's the circa 1987 Boo Boo, yeah, which I still have.
Yeah.
And
you got to save those to remind you that.
That's right. Yeah.
To humble you.
Why you're
Exactly.
That's right.
So my brother and I he was really the blacksmith, I was the farrier, and we started a business in my grandma's garage, and he was all about the metal work, and as I was collecting material, I think he made it out of this spring right here. So this is an automotive or a truck spring. I'm not sure how we acquired it back in the day, but he didn't know anything about heat treating. But he was really aggressive. He really loved. He was a hell of a. You know, he knew how to use a hammer, and forge this blade out of it. So I knew enough at the time. Hey, Chris, you need to anneal that piece of steel before you start working it. Phooey, whack, 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 whack. So he made this great shape, laid it down, didn't even quench it, just laid it down, schnick. So you'll see a big crack in the toe of this thing. So there's reasons why you want to pay attention and think ahead of what's my material, what am I going to do with the material, how am I going to work the material, and then how am I going to heat treat the material so it can function as desired. So we're going to we have to learn some terminology. So really this is page 5 of your workbook. So what I'm going to try to do here is, as we go through some of these things, maybe. Okay, which button do you, what button was I not in? Left, right? Okay. Page 5. Okay. So one of the things, you have to learn a handful of words, handful of concepts and a handful of words. And this A1, the lower transformation temperature, these A's, the A's you have to learn. So A1 is the lower transformation temperature. A2, the magnetic point. A3, the upper transformation temperature. And back. Oh, I think it's back here in page 68A is what I'm calling it, is this Temple Guide to Metallurgy. You might want to put a post-it on that page because you're going to be looking at this over and over and over. And I keep one laminated in the shop because you constantly are touching it, constantly looking at it. So this chart will help define some of the terminology over on the right-hand column, and it's marked with the up through the temperature ranges here. So this right there at about 1350 is a lower A1, kind of across the board. Now this scale here on the bottom is a percent of carbon in your steel, and we're going to talk about that later. Vertical columns of temperature in Fahrenheit. But for pretty much most all the steels you're going to be working, A1's constant at, wherever it is, to 1350. And A2, as we'll go up a little higher there, you'll see the lower transformation temperature is where the steel is changing its state, its phase, and it'll start going non-magnetic. Yeah, right. Yeah. Okay, so 1350 right there is A1, where you're just starting to transform, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. And then we have a magnetic temperature, and then we have an upper transformation temperature. Anyway, we're going to be talking about all these things, but those are three important ones to keep in mind. All right, if you wouldn't mind, let's see, before you go back to that, we're going to talk about annealing. Whoops. Ooh, ooh.
Where do you want me to go?
Right where you were, 68A. Nope, before that. One more. There you go. So you'll see this line here, line that says annealing and normalizing, which is above the upper transformation temperature. So things are happening. Things are happening with the molecules between the lower transformation temperature and the upper transformation temperature. And that's where steel starts losing its magnetism at A2, and it doesn't complete that until A3. So we'll get into more detail later, but to anneal something, you need to be maybe 50 to 100 degrees above that and hold it for a while and let all your little molecules settle out. But you'll notice this line is at an angle, so your lower carbon, there's a difference in temperature between where it starts to go non-magnetic and when it does go totally magnetic, non-magnetic. And that difference in temperature is decreasing as your carbon content increases. So when you're making a knife or a really hard tool with high carbon content, those two lines are almost identical. So when you see these guys on Forge and Fire sticking their magnet on something and it's like, yeah, that's good enough. Maybe, maybe not. This is why we want to educate everybody on it.
That answered my question, except how long should I hold it? And I was taught that you're supposed to catch it on the rising and not the falling.
Yes.
So if you're trying to keep it above the 50 degrees above the initial magnetization, how long should you soak it without it still going too high?
You need to, and we'll talk about that later also, but you need to make sure that the material is totally at the temperature
Through the whole
thickness.
So if something really thin, you're
Right,
But you pull in and out to try to balance it then?
yes.
Okay.
Or you're using heat, a different method.
Or you have a very good oven, yes.
Yeah. And so that's another point here too, as we'll talk, is if you're going to get really serious about tool making or knife making, you need to get a temperature oven. If you're starting out circa 1985, toaster oven. And that works. That works for a lot of things.
Yeah.
And I use, and you can cook more of your lunch. And you may notice a hole in the side of that thing. That's what I use for my electrode rod oven. When I'm doing a lot of stick welding, I stick my rods in there, crank it up to 350 and go to work and pull the rods out and flux is dry. You just meter it along. So it serves a lot of purposes. And also I was able to squeeze my little pitch pot in that thing to heat the cast iron bowl up so that you can now start melting your pitch. But if you have a real deep pitch pot, it's not getting in the oven. But it works. It works. Okay, so let's see. We're back to, so we talked about annealing. We're going to need to talk, you need to kind of get familiar with austenite, which is above this A3. So up above here is austenite, and that's where the steel is now changed into this new phase, which we'll be talking about. And that's a good working area, and that's a term you need to start getting familiar with. And hardness, you know, we always say, oh, this thing's really hard. Okay, well, what is hardness actually? But it's the ability to resist indentation. So if you have, and we use a scale called Rockwell C scale, and if you're measure something this for, you're trying to measure the hardness of this. Lost my train of thought on that. Anyway, the ability to resist is the hardness. Now, we'll go over this later too, but these little calibrated files, you know, if you don't have a test machine, and who does, maybe one person in the room, I don't know, maybe not. But you can buy these little files on the internet, and they are calibrated for the different Rockwell hardnesses, and then you use them and you're scraping across your material, and you can bracket the hardness range. So, you know.
Wow, so it only file on certain hardnesses?
Yep. Yeah.
That's pretty neat.
Yeah, so this, like the low end, so Rockwell 40. So if you can, if your file so that's skating on that, so that means it's harder than 40. And go to the other end, which is 65 in this kit. So that's made of scratch. So now you can keep jockey around till you get it bracketed.
Never heard of it.
So these, just like $70 for the total Japanese version, and it's like 170 if you want the USA version. So that's, yeah, fit your budget. So far, so good at $70. Okay, and then we talk about hardenability. So is the piece of steel, number one, is it hard? And hard usually means brittle. Does it have hardenability, which means can the full thickness of the material, is it easily transformed when you quench it? Will the whole thickness go hard, or just maybe, you know, not the full thickness, surface, right? And then we talk about this whole heat treating, and this bugged me for many years. What does heat treating mean? Because you read this book, you read that book, you get these different versions. Well, heat treating is a recipe. That's all it means. And it's a combination of annealing, hardening, and tempering. So if my brother would have annealed this spring first, it wouldn't still look like a spring, number one, because your material will return back to, you know, the original shape if you're not taking it up into that annealing range and letting it then cool very slowly and regain its, relieve its internal stresses. you could, it depends what you're working on, but it's, I've heard you normalize, that's another term you're gonna hear. So normalization is getting up to that annealing temperature and then letting your object cool down to air temperature, so that refines the grain of the material and makes it harder than if you would now take this at its anneal temperature and put it in a vermiculite and let it cool overnight. So we'll talk about this also later, but
Andy, can you anneal like 5 pieces today, let's say, and then work on them in the future sometime?
yeah. So the recommendation for tempering is do it right after you harden something. So if you anneal it, you can leave it there for centuries. Yeah, but once you harden it, it's better if you just temper it then, because it's so brittle, just like this. It just he just had it laying out on a hunk of wood and schnick. So if he would have, and I don't think he hardened it. I think he just was forging it and was like, damn, that looks good. Schnick. So anyway, okay, so we've learned a handful of words, okay? We've learned a handful of words. And this list in this book, in this little handout, is a fraction of things, and there's extra words in here too. I threw a few in there. I don't know what they are, but or I'm not that familiar with it. But okay, so page 8, please. Okay, so yeah. So, feel free to read at your leisure in your book, but the structure of iron and its alloys are crystalline in nature. And a piece of iron is, these crystals are somewhat in line with their axes, or I should say that, I said that incorrectly. They're not in a line with an axis, they're random. Yeah. So if you go advance one more page, please. Yeah. So these crystals on the left side, they're
I just hit it at the start, I don't understand. I'm too old.
all right, so grain size. So the iron is composed of grains. They're kind of in random orientation, like figure A there on the left. And grain size is important for determining strength. So the finer or tinier, closer grains are stronger than the grains as you go to the right.
Stronger or harder?
The finer cluster of grain structure is harder and more tough, actually. Oh, that's another word, toughness. So we talk about hardness. I don't think I got tough in my glossary there. Anyway, so hardness means brittle, really, is brittle. Toughness is when you're, this might work. So tough is where it can resist bending and come back to where it was. And so a lot of people will say, oh, stainless steel, that is some really hard stuff. No, stainless steel is really soft, but is really extremely tough. So when you get a drill bit in there and you're starting to cut through this thing, it just tears the material, which galls the bit, which if you're screwing two stainless things together, the threads are actually galling on each other, and if they were hard, they'd slip on each other, but the stainless material is so soft that it's tearing the planes together, and that's what galling is. Which reminds me of a funny joke. I had a instrument tech working for me in California. He was a new guy, fresh out of school, and he comes to me one day, because we use a lot of stainless and all the instrumentation in the power plant. He's like, "Andy, those pieces galvanized." "What?" "Those pieces galvanized together. I don't know what to do." "I don't know what you're talking about, Chris. What do you mean galvanized?" It turned out they had galled together, and so he was wondering how to fix the problem. So you got to be, words are important, and they mean something. Okay, so the tighter the packed grain, the tougher it is to break and for cracks to start. So if you have a large grain system or piece of steel or iron, the large grains, there's more opportunity for a crack to start and then start following those larger delineations and create a fracture, right? So if a crack or corrosion or whatever starts at one of those grain boundaries, it's got to lead in to, if the grain is large, there's fewer interruptions for that crack to propagate. If the grain is mini and totally random, if you get a little crack started, it's like drilling a drill stop hole, and the little crack will just go to the next boundary and stop. So it's better to have small grain size versus large. And the one thing that a blacksmith can manage with that is the higher the temperature, and these were examples you can read about in the text there, but this was these were pieces of steel that were heated up and then just allowed to cool off. So they went up to dark cherry, allowed it to cool off, and you have a small grain size. Now they go to a higher temperature, cherry red, and then it cooled off. Well, the grains don't compact each other. They don't get smaller on their own. And then you go up to yellow and back down to room temperature. Well, those grains are still large. They're not compact. So even though it's all now at room temperature, your piece of steel that went up to yellow has got a larger grain structure and is more prone for cracking.
So once you take that, for example, that blade and get that up to a light yellow and working it, but then as it cools down past that dark cherry color, if you continue to work it, you're definitely going to crack it because the grain structure is still in that.
No, so that's the other thing a blacksmith can control. You can control your heat, and you control the forging. So the working of the steel, you can actually compact those grains if you keep forging this thing. Now that sounds easy, doesn't it? But now you're saying, oh, I just got this whole area yellow hot. Can I possibly continue forging the whole thing down until this thing gets down to cherry red? Maybe, maybe not. It depends on your shape, depends on what, actually what you're trying to do. But what you can do is as you're forging it down, what is happening is you are compacting the grains back down into a smaller compact arrangement. And and the other thing is, once it's below cherry red, quit hammering on it, or you will break it. Yeah.
So it will crack when you start getting too low.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Question, when you hammer something like that, is it better to have like a big hammer? Does that make it better, or a light hammer? Is that?
I don't know. I think it's it's more about hammer control also, because
I got a 100-pound hammer at the house.
Yeah.
It flat out makes tight steel.
Yeah. So I'd say if you can control it with a power hammer to the thickness you want and the shape and all this stuff, go for it. I still think any type of, I don't think there's maybe there is, a threshold of weight and force and making it work and not making it work. But I think what's important is that you are working it. Because if it's something this thick, you're making a hardy or something, and now you've got to compact the whole thickness of the thing. That's a lot more difficult to do. But if you had hydraulic press, you could just squeeze, be done. But, so I didn't answer your question because I guess I don't know, but that's my sense of it.
I know with a press, you don't get that hardness.
Oh, okay.
As you do out of a hammer.
Huh. So even though you're compacting it,
It's a squishing.
squishes out,
It's not.
deforms it. Oh,
You're just moving it around.
okay.
Is
Ted?
there a way to reduce grain size through heating, not through hammering?
I think if you're in the sub-zero temperatures, you can, but because there's some cryogenic stuff going, which I know nothing about, but I think might be possible. That's what you're talking about?
Like AUBL or something?
I don't know. There is some discussion down on this graph about cryogenic forging, but I know absolutely nothing about that.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Now,
It's gonna be cold next week.
yeah, yeah, really. Yeah, yeah. So going back to forging down. So you want to forge. Whoops. You want to forge down below the critical temperature. So when it goes from non-magnetic to magnetic, that's kind of your stopping point of as far as grain structure compaction. Now you'll hear other people's, and I've heard this in Urbana a lot, continue forging, or once you're at dark cherry going to black, you're planishing, so you're going for surface finish at that point compared to metallurgical impact.
Wouldn't you lighten up on your hammer strokes when you get down to that point?
Yeah, because you're just, so planishing is smoothing and dressing, yeah. Yeah. So we talked about grain structure, and I wanted to pass this around. So this is a piece of wrought iron that's, there is no carbon in it. And I should have cleaned up the break there better, but anyway. So wrought iron with no carbon tends to be stringy versus this grain assembly. And when you, say, cut this and just break it off, you'll see kind of a ropey structure to it, and that's what wrought iron looks like.
And it's made without carbon?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, I got you.
Okay, if you'll go to next page, please. Okay. So this is the maximum attainable hardness of a quenched steel relative to carbon. So as we go from wrought iron, which is 0 carbon, to the extremes, like some of these steels here. Matter of fact, that steel race and that steel race right there are like at 1% virtually, so they're off scale high here. And so 1% is that end of the graph. But so what this is trying to tell you here is the more carbon content you have, the higher maximum hardness could be achieved. So if you have wrought iron, which is going around, you cannot harden it because there's no carbon in it. And then we work with hot rolled steel, your typical, BMG hot rolled stuff. That's like a 0.2%, which is, down. And these charts, this is another thing that just bugs the shit out of me, is actually, did I already screw it up here? Let's see, 1 second, stand by. talked about. Okay. Well, we're going to have to, I guess I kind of lost my train of thought with this right here, but. Okay, one second, because let's see if I. Okay, we'll get to it later. I thought I'd skipped over it somehow. Okay, so anyway, as carbon increases, the potential you have to harden it to a much higher level is there. But you notice it's like you got to be over 40 points of carbon, we'll get to that later, to have any appreciable, really super duper hard stuff. Okay.
Were they using wrought iron before they started introducing carbon to it? Or
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that was a precursor, then they found
Yeah.
a better way of doing it?
Yeah.
Wrought iron is like more like pig iron and stuff like that, and they introduced the carbon to it in steel manufacturing. That's the difference between wrought and steel. If you ever look at Russian Sam's pictures on his Facebook, this guy, he does a bunch of stuff in wrought iron.
Yeah.
With the intricacy of the lines and stuff, it's really neat.
It just doesn't make the strength.
Okay,
Well, they actually should twist it to make the strength.
you were talking about cold roll,
Old wagon wheels and stuff like
and
that.
you gave carbon content,
Chains.
and then you said, this really bugs me.
Oh, well,
Then
we'll get to it later because that's what I had to, it's a little bit down the road here. But what bugs me is, and we'll go over it in detail later, is these axes of percent carbon. So in one book, they'll say points of carbon. Another place will say percentage of carbon. Then another place will say percent of alloy. Anyway, they're not consistent in the way the terminology they use. And we're going to have a little demo of that actually to straighten that out. But this is another example why it pisses me off because again, here's a book that's supposed to be educating you, but it doesn't really, it's not even labeled, the axis wasn't labeled in the book. Okay, so as you can see, if you have 35 to about 45% carbon, that's where you now start to get some hardenability out of it, potential hardenability. Okay, page 11. All right, now this is temperature. Oh, yeah, in your book, there's a little boo-boo there. It says 0 degrees Fahrenheit, but the 0 is really supposed to be the degree symbol. So it should just read degrees Fahrenheit, not cryogenic. Okay. So you've got temperature in Fahrenheit on this scale. You have Rockwell hardness going up this way. So here's a, points of carbon. So 35 points of carbon, 80 points of carbon, 120 points of carbon. As you go up in temperature, the hardening drops off. So that's another thing to keep in mind in the future is as you have a hardened, if you have a hardened piece of material, as you increase the temperature, hardness is going to decrease. And this is what we're going.
Tempering temperature.
Yes, so this is a tempering temperature graph. So you've hardened the material, and now it's too hard to actually work. It might break when you're using it. So you want to temper it or relieve some stress out of it and make it less brittle. And as we temper it and these temperatures go up, you can see the hardness will fall off. So we'll do some examples later, but some people might temper, when they're hardening their knife, goes in the quench. Now the whole thing's hard, or maybe you quench up to there. So this part's hard, this part's softer. Now maybe you do a spine temper. So if you put that on your heat and soften the spine, so it's not as super hard. There's all these tricks to manipulate the property of the steel by that tempering temperature and where you apply the temperature, heat.
A lot of times where you see that tempering is when you heat up the steel, especially like with the torch after it's all nice and shiny, you see the different colors, like the yellow, blue, purple, and all that. That's actually the tempering of it.
Yep. Okay, so let's see. Page 12, please. Okay, so this is O1 tool steel. We'll go through this later about the types of steel, but O, there's some real simple things to remember. O is oil quench in tool steel. So these are, again, tempering temperatures on the horizontal axis, hardness up here. But you can see hardness, as hardness diminishes with increasing temperature, the actual toughness, which is the ability for the steel to resist deformation, yield, I guess, more, then that increases. So you're using these tempering temperatures to provide some toughness in your blade so it isn't brittle and fracturing, capable of less opportunity to fracture. So there's a balance, a nice balance that you want between the hardness of your blade so that you can actually sharpen it and the toughness of the blade so you can keep whacking on it, or 2x4 or whatever, and it still survive. Okay.
Kind of contradictory then, it needs a balance.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And that's why if you're super duper serious about it, get a tempering oven. Because now time at the temperature rating, Bob, this is what's, hey Bob. Bob. So now going back to your question about going up to annealing temperature and how long, there's charts and graphs that show you all that, but for tempering, the basic rule of thumb is 1 hour per inch of thickness for tempering. So if you really want to have your tool at, hey, I want it right there, well, you need a way to control the temperature right there, and you need a way to hold it for an hour if it's an inch thick. If it's a 1/4 inch thick for a knife or something, now 15 minutes. So you want to hold it at that temperature for 15 minutes. So doing that in a gas forge, I do have gas forges. Don't like using them. It's because you can't control the temperature. You can't get, there's lots of things they're good for heating up steel and forging things, but for more critical items, a cold forge is easier for me to use. Okay. All right. So what are the other properties steel has to have to make all these happen? And what temperature do you need to get to be able to quench it to get the hardness, and what does this all mean? So if you'll kind of scoot up to page 13, please. Okay, so this represents iron molecules, so down at room temperature. They call this a body-centered cubic, and the little iron molecules are making a cube, and there's one in the middle, so it's really strong. And as you heat iron up above this A2 temperature and A3 temperature, between A2 and A3, it's converting itself over to this stuff called phase-centered cubic iron. So now that little iron molecule in the middle is moving out, and now they're on the faces of your cube. So
They multiply. You get like 2 on the first center. As you heat it, there's more atoms or molecules being created.
good question. I don't know how to describe that.
I mean, it's the same picture is what I'm trying
Yes,
to get.
yes.
You know what I mean? You put
Yes.
the heat to it, things start moving on, molecules bouncing, God knows what. Okay.
Yeah, so you're changing the phase of the iron, and this is what's kind of startling too. you know, you think of a object as solid, but atoms are buzzing around in there right now as we speak. So you don't have to get it up to melting temperature for them to be fluid. It's constantly in motion. The atoms are constantly in motion in something that hard. So what we're finding out, though, is if we get above this A2, somewhere between A2 and A3, you get to that point. And the higher carbon you get in your steel, that difference between A2 and A3 narrow down. So if you're dealing with something up in the 0.85% carbon, essentially when it goes non-magnetic, you're there. But if you're lower than that, there's some bandwidth, if you want to say that, before this turns into this. And so why is this important, and why do we do that, is the steel is changing its phase, and now carbon is, okay, let me back up 1 second. So now we have carbon in the molecule. So iron, we've added an alloy called carbon. Now it's an alloy steel. And carbon, if you now let this cool back down to this, the iron molecules want to go back to that body centered, and it now squirts out ferrite, I think, carbide. So it is outside this little cubic zone. So now how do you get the carbon to stay in the material? And how you do that is by heating it up above its A3. Carbon's now in the face center cubic because it's like an empty box and you've got a carbon in there now. Now if you quench it fast, now you've got a carbon in there, so your little cube's loaded up. Now you're quenching it, so it's converting back to body center, but you got a carbon also in there. So they refer to it in the text as the pregnant crystal, because it's.
How does it?
Yeah, good point. Good point. Good point. I don't know the answer to that, but that is a good point, because you see those other charts where as your temperature increases, the hardness is going down. So you would think that it would have to shed some carbon out of there. All right. So when we put the steel in the stress state, that's hardening. Then when we relieve some of the stresses with your toaster oven, that's tempering, or you do it on the fire, you do it in the forge, you do it, there's a few different ways you can do with this. And then if you anneal it, that's taking all the stress out of it. Then there's normalizing, where you're taking a lot of stress out of it, but you're not getting to the full annealed state. Okay. But you can, Appendix D back in here, I went to Hot Shot Kilns, and they have a library of heat treating recipes, so that's where I pulled this stuff down. I just took a handful of things you might be interested in. I mean, they've got a lot of them. So these heat treat recipes are out there, and that will tell you, use this media, get it up to this temperature, hold it for this long, do this, do that. I mean, it gives you exactly what you're supposed to be doing with it. Okay, page 14, please. Okay, so this is time and versus temperature, and if you're, hey, this is kind of on your point, but not exactly, kind of the reverse of your point. So when you're very hot, so in 2600 degrees, that's where steel's melting, and there's body-centered cubes when you're melting. So this graph represents, you take a piece of steel and let it cool off, and you're way up here in liquid mode, and then you come down through body-centered. I mean, we're way up there, 2600 degrees, so you're off the chart. You're in white heat. And it's cooling down. It kind of holds at these points. Cools down. Now you're going through the face center cubic, so this is where we would like to be working. And then you hit this lower temperature is 1670, not sure what that is offhand. And then, let's see, A3, A2, that's 3. That's your upper transfer, so A3 is your upper transformation temperature. A2 is the lower transformation temperature or the magnetic point. So it's back to body centered here, goes to phase center, but I guess when you're liquid, you're back to body. So kind of just the reverse of what you were asking. Okay. So again, use your friend. This, you'll find this very helpful. So A2 is your lower transformation temperature and the magnetic point, or sorry, A1 is the lower transformation temperature, A2 is the magnetic point. So you've got to be above the full magnetic point to be up in the annealing and the total face-centered cube. So if you want to make this, so what my brother should have done is take this up to this temperature, hold it till it was thoroughly through and through, and then you stick this into a, drum of vermiculite, sand, wood ash, lime, and leave it overnight and come back and get it, and then it'll be soft. And you can do that a couple times. Or I have heard people do the normalizing bit where they, and you'll see this in fortune fire, sometimes they get it red hot and then they're swinging it in the breeze, trying to go through these normalizing cycles. They'll do maybe 3 cycles of normalizing, and then they go back up to the heat, and then you never see them anneal. You never see that. They never see them tempering it. You never see any of that stuff. But so the normalization helps refine some grain and take stresses out. Then the full anneal takes all the stresses out. But it's all about this graph and those temperatures. Okay, let's see. Page 15, please. This is just kind of details what is going on here. And I found Temple was a little hard to find because they've been bought by somebody else now, but finding this graph took a little time. I had a PDF copy of it from way back in the time machine, but I found this as available in the California Blacksmith Association web. So you never know where you're going to get your information from. But then they had one called This Chart Altered or something, and they just stripped out a bunch of things that you probably aren't interested for day-to-day blacksmithing work, and it simplified the whole graph, but it's linked it in. See your reference page if you want to find it. Okay. So we talked about already the carbon content here influences this transformation rate. So the higher level of carbon you get, those transformation temperatures have a smaller and smaller delta, and finally they're right on top of each other when you get out to about 0.8% carbon and the temperatures. And you might notice here this maximum forging temperature, up in the orange region here, it's light yellow. Maximum forging temperature. So when it's got low carbon, you can forge it at a hotter temperature. When you start getting up in these higher carbon contents, they're down in the orange heat is your maximum. And I heard David Baker say on the show the other day, it's forge it at the salmon temperature. And I thought, exactly. So what color salmon? I don't know. But it is not yellow heat, I can tell you that. It's got to be down in here somewhere. All right. Oh yeah, I want to make this point too. This upper transformation temperature decreases with carbon content. So your mild steel, maybe you had to get it up, to a lighter color of red before it lost its magnetism, but with higher carbon steels, it's going to be lower to get there. Okay, page 16. All right, so now it's decision time. What are you going to do? Now you know enough to be dangerous. What are you going to make? What are you gonna do? What's the purpose of your tool? Or is it your project artistic in nature, structural in nature? Are you making a tool? Is it, is your tool? One second here. I think this gentleman didn't get a book. Oh, you got one?
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
I don't know if I've sold somebody else's, but.
Okay, I think, I don't remember handing you one. And speaking of books, if you would like to donate, I would appreciate offset some costs, printing costs. Okay, so your tools, is it gonna be for something you're using on wood, a hatchet, axe, stonemason tools? Are you gonna be shaping something, cutlery, all these, what is your end target? What do you wanna do with it? That's going to shape what type of steel you want to use to start with, and then that's going to dictate the heat treat you need for your tool. And then once you decide, oh, okay, I'm making a tool, do I want it a one and done? Do I just want to punch a hole and get on with it? Or do I want to use this because I've got a railing and I want to punch 300 holes? Maybe you want to, you're going to want a tool that's got more carbon in it, so it's reusable and hard and reusable. And again, you can have steels that have carbon in them that aren't hardened, just their added carbon in the alloy. When you hit that thing with your hammer, you're going to feel it. I mean, it's not squish with like mild steel. You feel that firmness resisting your hammer when you're hitting that stuff. Okay, all right, so now this is the part I thought I goofed up here. Okay, so steel. So if you pretend that dollar bill is a hunk of steel, and for, how much is 1 penny? How many pennies are in a dollar? 100 pennies, right, so that's one. Way to go, you passed the class. Yeah, so 1/100th, so that's 1% of your steel. If it has carbon in it, it's going to be pretty hard. It's going to be as hard as that bearing race right there. So 1/100th of your total mass makes the difference of super hard, 2 pennies, that by definition, steel has no more than 2% carbon in it. Okay, so what are we going to do here? So steel has mainly iron, up to 2 pennies worth of carbon, a dash of other elements, phosphor, manganese, things that make them easier to machine or work. So if you'll go to, let's see. Actually, I guess I don't know if I have let's take it up another, let's see. Oh, I think we were there, yeah. Back it up, please, sorry. I thought I had, okay, so this page is kind of important. So 1 penny is 1% carbon. So now we're talking with hot roll steel, you're talking about 0.2 of that penny is how much carbon is in that hot rolled. Whereas the full penny is in this race right here. And in between is what we're going to be talking about. So when people talk about percent carbon and points of carbon, this is what's very frustrating sometimes to me, that points are equal percentage points. So if they say this steel has 40 points of carbon in it, that means it's got 0.4 0.5%. So that's less than half of a penny, is 0.4, in the steel. So, you know, our day-to-day stuff that you're making things in the forge, that can be 0.2, 0.3. So very, you know, you're talking a little snip of carbon there. But I thought this is what irritates me about these graphs, because they'll talk about points of carbon, which really mean percentage points, because by definition, steel maximum is 2% carbon, but pretty much anything we're going to work on is going to be less than 1% carbon, and pretty much everything in this shop that you're going to be doing is going to be just a little teeny fraction of that carbon. So to make it easier on these scales, they call it points versus percentage points. So with the low carbon, you know, 0.05% to 0.15%. So that's really 5 points to 15 points. So when you're 5 points, you're down here. 15 points is between 0.1 and 0.2. So that's, you're way down on that end of the scale. And these high carbon steels, 0.55 to 1, so now you're 0.55 or here to 1. So now now you're in the different range. So, you know, that's a cylindrical roller bearing out of a big, larger bearing. So that, I don't know what that's mystery steel, but I'm through these resources, I'm thinking that's 52-100, and the 100 part tells you how many points. So that's 100 would mean 1%, which puts you out here. All right, can I confuse you any more than that?
It's that decimal that throws you off.
Exactly.
I mean, it's 0.2, which is nothing, but when you see 2 point something.
That's it. That's what, and when you go through some of the literature, you don't know, unless you already have some background in it, you could go down the wrong trail big time. Yep.
It's just amazing to me that we're talking about like 0.5% versus like 1% making such a difference in how hard that steel is.
Exactly.
You know, when you would think like maybe like in the 50 or 60% department, you know, a lot more added to it or taken from.
Right.
Being down, you know, below 1%, it's just kind of amazing.
It is. It is. It is very.
See the rock, which is nothing, you know what I mean? And then you add a little bit of percentage to it.
Yep. Okay. So next page, please. So we're going to now talk about the steel numbering system. And so, excuse me. So typically there's 4, there could be 5 digits in the steel numbering system. So your first 2 digits are the alloy content, and if you go up to page 18, this is what that means. So these are the alloys. So the alloys are carbon plus a dash of this and a dash of that. So if we're talking with our, plain carbon, hot rolled, that's like 1020, 1030, 1018, cold rolled maybe. So you're way down here. But the 10, that 10, the first 2 digits, that's telling you, hey, I've got plain carbon steel, no extra dash of this and a dash of that. Now, we're going to be looking at, like this is a valve stem out of a large valve. So it's 4140, so 41 tells me that's a chromium molybdenum alloy, or chrome moly because it's easier to say. So chrome moly, I know that's chrome moly. Okay, cool. 40, so now if you go back 1 page, please. the last 3 digits, 2 to 3 digits, will tell you what that percent of carbon is. So in our case of that shaft, it's a 4140, so it's going to be chrome moly with 0.4% carbon in it. So now, if we, this is, came up earlier, I think, was mentioned. So on this, on the carbon range, so wrought iron, no carbon, 0%. Steel, by definition, it goes up to 2% carbon. That's your 2 pennies and $1. Anything above that is cast iron in some form. And then there's, you got your pig iron, your gray iron, your this and that, and all this stuff, which fill out that spectrum. So that's how it kind of plays out. Okay, so one page further.
With all the, like, recycling now, how do they control this? I mean, if they melt the car down, there's gonna be 50 different types of steel in it.
All right. I wish I could tell you.
They actually have a lab on site, and they dip the liquid steel, amazing. Just
Yeah.
right there at the fountain.
Yeah, what, of course, I can't think of the name of the place. It's down in Petersburg, Jordan, I think it is, Jordan. They bought all the recycling in this general area, and they make recycled I-beams, is what they make down there. And if you've, I don't know if the, I was wondering if this guild, have you ever taken a tour of that? Oh man, I'll tell you what, I talked to Bruce about it the other day, and he's been through there, but if I can, if we can get a tour, if anybody, you know, if you're interested, but it'd be on a week, evening or week, something like that, I'm sure. Yeah, so to answer your question, I'm not sure what the sorting process is, or if they sort. Maybe they get the plastic out, and then they go for it, if it sticks to the magnet, big magnet on the drag line. But just as Bob was saying, you know, we got this tour to watch them, and it simplifies metallurgy 100% because you're in this control room overlooking these molten vats of steel that they, you know, it's an arc furnace, so big electrodes go down there and gets to molten level, and they dip a little sample out of there and shoot it pneumatically over to their lab, so it's solid but hot. They pneumatically send it over to their lab. The guy takes a slice of it, puts it under the microscope, does a couple little tricks, and then radios back to these guys, and you know, it's just so loud, it's just bursting your eardrums in that place. And these guys are like, you see them on the radio, they go over this pallet with bags of whatever. I need manganese, I need, you know, special ingredient number 12, and they throw a bag of this stuff out into that vat, and then they keep doing that. So they start with a batch that's already known good alloy, and then I think they keep 1/3, and then they add to fill up the rest of it, so they don't dilute their primary sample, and then anyway, that was an eye-opening experience right there. But
And they do tours?
they do what?
Tours?
They give tours, yeah. So if you're interested, I could make some calls and find out if that's.
Where's this at?
It's down in Petersburg. It's Jordan.
Oh yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, so I'll see what options are.
Oh, is Bruce okay?
Excuse me.
You say you just talked to Bruce, is he okay?
This was last week. We were setting up for tools and whatever I might need for the demonstration, and I said, "Hey, Bruce, have you ever been down to the Jordan foundry? Or it's an arc furnace. They make I-beams down there." And then he said, "Yeah, I've been down there." I said, "Yeah, I got a tour there through the ASME." He says, "I'm a member of the chapter." "You are?" "I'm not a mechanical guy, but I am interested in metallurgy." And a Dominion employee she's a mechanical engineer. She says, "Hey, they're having this lecture on metallurgy for, you know, Viking swords. You might be interested." "Oh, okay." So that got me connected with the ASME chapter, who then said, hey, if you ever want to go on our tours, you don't have to be a member. You just, when we put out the call for the tour of somewhere, then you can just sign up and get on there. Okay, awesome. So they had metallurgy for swords one time. They had the tour of this foundry. They had a tour of, is it Norfolk, the monitor where they're doing the preservation of the monitor turret in Nevada water down there, so corrosion protection. So that's something else in the power industry. We're always, that's another topic I had to know. So it's, anyway, so they have a lot of interesting things going on, and that's my only connection. And then Bruce also had done the same thing, and our worlds. It turned out the day that I took that tour, he wasn't there. I didn't know Bruce at the time, but that's how small worlds are. You never know. Okay, and he's off in Pennsylvania, by the way.
Okay.
So he's not here for illness. He's out of town doing something fun. More fun than this. Can you believe it? All right. Okay, so where do you get the information? You can get information from your Junkyard Steels out of the mini books. There's a chart in your handout of basic junkyard steels, which is on page 30. You might want to mark that, because what I found even after putting all this together, I'm like, where the hell is my, I know it's in here. Then I put Post-its on mine, and it was like a lot easier to find stuff. Okay, so we've gone through steel specification numbers, how to read them. Oh yeah, that was one thing. So 15, so I brought some, so 15 is high manganese carburizing metal. So one of the things, oh, do it. 15N20, I don't know if you've heard of that before. You hear that on Forge and Fire a lot, because they use this as their brightening steel in their Damascus knives. So 15N20, so what does that mean? So 15, you can look at this chart. Oh, it's high manganese. And the N tells you it's got nickel in it. And how much? Well, hey, 2%. So when you get into some of these alloys, 2 in this case doesn't mean 0.2 of carbon. It's really 2% of something. So when you get in the little abnormal off of steel, you need to double check. And this was something else as I was collecting all this, was over the years I'd made some tools, and I couldn't remember what did I make that out of. I don't know, but what I should have done in hindsight is stamp them. Just stamp them, like 15N20. Now I know what that is, because if it goes back in a pile and that paint wears off, I think that's a piece of steel, but then until you start working it, then you're going to be surprised. But one thing I noticed, Bruce, he had a piece of 5160. So 51, low chromium, 60 is going to be 0.6% carbon. So this is a coil spring, raw material for a coil spring for cars. And this is a coil spring from a car. So when we do our spark test, I want to see Bruce's known 5160 versus mine, maybe 5160. And one thing I enjoyed from Bruce's was his steel was stamped on the end. And I thought, I don't know if that's a practice you guys are into or not, but at least in power plants, you've got a lot of material, like boiler tube material, that has to be known. It has to be ASTM certified. You have to follow the heats from the foundry. you have to know exactly what that stuff is, and so you have tube stock, bar stock, flat stock, you name it. And the common practice is you stamp the number on the end of your material on both ends. And if you're try to be disciplined so that when you go, there, I got that piece put in the boiler, that you mark the end again, because you just cut the number off. So you got to be disciplined in your techniques. Other people might paint them a certain color for a type of steel they're using, but nonetheless, I just thought it might be a tip you guys are familiar with or not. Okay, so we've talked about those alloys. And we've talked about, let's see, I think we might want to go up one slide.
Can you operate,
Here it comes.
It's a secret button. Okay.
Good there?
It's good, yep. So on page 19, these are, you know, if you're going to make a tool, what do you need to make it out of? How much carbon do you need? How hard does it need to be? And these are an example of a scale of what to do. So you've got, you know, if you want great toughness and a little hardness, 40 to 50 points of carbon. So these are the uses. Oh, am I going to make a, you know, a rivet head tool? Am I going to be making a, you know, an axle out of it? Well, so 40 to 50 points might be an axle or gears. And so what I do is I just have this wooden box, and whenever I have some alloy that I think I could use someday, I throw it in there. So now I got all these gears and the shafts and bearings and whatever. But if I knew what they were, I should have labeled them. That's my point I was trying to make with everybody. So that when you say, hey, I want to make something like this, what do I need? Hey, well, go find an axle. All right. Go up to the next page, please. All right, so now these are the comparative properties on page 20. So these are where the tool steels are been identified by industry, and now this goes back to that lettering system. So so W, water hardening, S, shock resisting, oil, O, I should say, oil hardening, and H for hot work tools. So there's 4 or 5 letters that you can just remember, and they're easy to remember. Then you can coordinate with your quench mediums, oil or water or air. But that's a good reference point there. And 21, please. Okay. So then this is tool steel by type. So if you want, you know, a shock resisting tool, you'd go to your S series. If you want a cold working tool, you'd go to air hardening, A or D or O, oil hardening. And the W series, water hardening, you know, for the lower end. Okay, so then how hard's hard? I talked about the, if you go up to page 22, please. So you'll see somewhere, oh, the file test. So I noticed on Forge and Fire, they'll have their knife in there and they'll, oh, that skates. You know, what does skating mean? Well, your file's not digging into the surface. Now, this isn't particularly sharp, but anyway, you get the idea. So skating, if your file, if you know the material and the hardness, then you can say, hey, this is harder than this if this is skating. The other way to do it is, which I actually saw in one of these books as I was going through this, is using the tip of your file on a piece and trying to gouge it with the tip versus the teeth. Might be something. And then we have the calibrated hardness files, which can bracket you down. You know, as we did earlier, we bracketed the hardness of this material.
What's a big, like, grit for a file? You don't have the money for the file thing.
Yeah.
What's one that you could be pretty safe and say, hey, it's not too bad? It's getting on.
Yeah, this is a flat bastard, and that'll tell you the type of the teeth. Yeah, yeah, I know. There's a lot of good jokes about that. Yeah, but that's kind of worn out. I've been kind of busy before I retired, so I always have these big plans. But so I bought a bunch of files to replace these, and because clearly they've been abused, and they're still in a box. So I hope to get it.
Is that what the Rockwell C is?
So the Rockwell.
File?
That's a designation of how hard it is, and yeah. So if it's 65 and up, is darn hard.
So using a file is like an easy way to check it, but the Rockwell C is actually more of a precise.
Yeah.
So if you're just checking in, if you don't really care about what particular number it needs to be,
Right.
then that's where you can use a file to check it.
You could say, oh, that's great.
Yeah.
It's
Slides off, it's great, and it's
at
only
least
a point, you know, it's a 30 or something
Right.
like that.
It's
as
at least
opposed
this
to-
amount, so.
Yeah.
But, but the better thing would be
Mhm.
to make it hotter and then a higher number file.
Yep.
Or actually use a Rockwell tester on it, actually does a push on.
Also, this file test will tell you about temper colors also. So maybe you start out with a very hard material, but as your temperature increases, then you see those temper colors, then it will be softening the steel to the point where maybe, you know, it was skating at the one end, but now the file's really cutting into it. Same material. Okay, so working temperatures. Again, we go back to this. So how do you determine the right forging temperature? And how do you determine the right quenching temperature? We already talked about that, but it's all about carbon content. So the higher the carbon content, the lower temperature you need to be forging it at. So how do you measure it? You know, okay, you got your visual, except now you've got to be in a shop that's got certain kind of lighting. You're staring at the flames coming out of your gas forge, wondering what are you looking at? So there are ways to do it. Now, so what I wanted to do today is an experiment of, okay, let's use the forge. We'll do a visual check. Okay, where do we think we are at? 1200, okay. So we can use a thermocouple calibrator, which is one device. So with a certain type of wire and a certain type of calibrator, when we touch the couple, which are the two wires twisted together, blink, then we can read the temperature very accurately within a few tenths of a degree. But you got to be in the range of the metal of the thermocouple wire, and this one will get us there. We also have the Chinesium infrared thermometer. So you just pull the trigger, look for your laser pointer somewhere. Someplace, where is it? Oh, gotta turn it on. Yeah, there. Anyway, so you put your dots on it and read it. So hopefully get a volunteer to operate this, volunteer to operate that. And I also brought a FLIR, which is this camera over there. It's a forward-looking infrared camera, and you actually see it is smart enough to take the infrared information and create a picture. So now it has a laser pointer. You point it to what you want to look at, and it'll just you just read the temperature right off the screen, and you can see the shape of what it is you're looking at also. So just to show you as a simple experiment, it's not as straightforward and accurate as you'd like to think it is. So, you know, you'll see repeatedly in all these books, you know, make a test piece. You're going to make a test piece. You're going to forge something that you think you want to make some X tool out of or X object out of, and you're going to heat treat it. Well, you could stick it in a vise and hit it, you know, hit it with a brass hammer, bang, see if it breaks. Well, or does it bend? Does it, you know, skate with a file? Does it do this? Does it have the ending after your heat treatment? Does it have the properties you're looking for? So, number one is knowing accurately what your temperatures are. And once maybe you don't know exactly what they are. You think in your shop it's this, but oops, now you got fluorescent lights. They look like that, but it's not like this. I used to do a lot of demos outdoors, and that's a challenge. You can easily burn up something in a fire, and you think you're way cooler than it is, but you really overheated it because the sunlight's giving you too much background light. So we'll be doing that in a few minutes. And again, the basics of heat treating, annealing, softening, hardening, and then, oops, it's too hard, you got to temper it so won't break. So we talked about annealing before, and I don't know who uses what, but this stuff's vermiculite. You buy it at your garden store. I keep I don't think it's 30 gallon, it's like a 20-gallon trash can, metal trash can in the forge, and a couple bags of that stuff's in there, and allows your part to cool off very slowly. I've used lime.
What is vermiculite actually?
It's about 1 molecule away from asbestos, so it's yeah, so they
Almost like kitty litter.
Yeah, exactly.
Except it's a stone, I think, and it allows.
yeah, it's like mica.
Not dissolving like today.
It's like mica.
It's for
And-
soil amendment to take place, soil, make it less.
Yeah, so it's used to absorb moisture in your garden.
You're trying to just let that help cool down and heat evenly.
Evenly. Yeah, because the worst thing you can do is lay this on
Sure.
a piece of metal, so this side's getting cold as ice.
And that's already cold.
Yep, and this size, so now major stresses. Stick. So if you have a 5-gallon trash can full, I picked my can because it was I can't remember. It might have been this. I don't remember. Anyway, I needed something deeper. So, and you don't want the tip of your tool down on the bottom of your can either, because that defeats the whole purpose. So you want it suspended in your material. But yeah, it's mica. It absorbs moisture. Yeah, and then they make perlite, Perlit, and that's used to, I think, put moisture in your soil. Yeah, I think that's what it. So depending on your soil conditions, you can use perlite or vermiculite, but either one of them. Vermiculite's more written about as being a annealing medium, but I've used bags of lime, and that's, okay, I found this flatter at some Iron in the Hat or somewhere, somewhere I got this flatter, and it's heavily corroded, pitted. So first thing I want to do is anneal it to get it soft so I can work it, because I don't know if it's ever been hardened. Who knows where it's been? Who knows what it's made out of? I don't know. But I wanted to soften it so now I can grind it and make something out of it, hopefully. but I had lime at the time, but I couldn't find vermiculite at that time. You can also use wood ash, so if you use wood stoves, we accumulate wood ash at our house and other same little small trash cans and use it in the garden and so forth to amend the soil. So that's cheap if you burn wood.
I have a question. The number one problem with knife makers, according to the forums, is drilling holes in the tang.
So
Before you do anything even, the drill will go a third of the way through, and then it just starts squeaking.
yeah,
It's getting hard on you. What's the secret?
the secret is to drill and punch your holes before you harden it. So you have this, you took that leaf spring, you annealed it, it's as soft as it's going to get for, assuming it's, maybe it's 5160, maybe it's 1085, but anyways, now it's as soft as it's going to be. And now you forge your shape. So technically it's not been hardened, you're just reshaping it. Now you would, profile it, drill your holes. If you're going to do the end tang drill, now's the time to do it. And now you're ready to harden it.
Well, even at that point, they have trouble, so.
Yeah.
Well, the problem too is the fact of all that forging on it, it's kind of lock it in. So,
Yeah.
So basically, if you heat it up with the torch, then you only kind of get to that red button, move it above the cherry red, and then
Yeah.
let it cool down, and it'll relax those molecules so you don't have to go through it.
Yeah. Yeah, they, like on Forge and Fire, you don't see the annealing process, so you don't know what happens there. I don't know what happens there, but what I do see is now they're trying to grind their knives and doing this and doing that, and now they're trying to drill a hole. I don't know, but that's my advice. And I'm not a knife maker, so don't hold me to it, but I'd profile the knife and then try to drill the holes. If it's still so hard you're breaking drill bits, then I'd use a carbide burr and make an indentation where my hole is going to be, and then go through with the drill bit. I don't know if that's right or wrong, but that's what I would do.
I'm just wondering if there was in some magic.
Well, like
'Cause those carbide
Jesse
bits
was saying.
don't grow in trees.
No.
Use cotton oil.
Yeah, that's another thing. Use cutting oil.
Yeah, but sometimes you wind up quenching your part with the oil, so it hardens as you're drilling.
I wouldn't think so, because your steel shouldn't be hot while you're drilling it. It would be room temperature. But it,
Too fast, causes you to shot. Speed is too fast when you drill it, causes you to shot.
yeah, that's true. Yep. And I've seen, like, take beeswax and you put it on your, smoosh it on your drill bit, and makes less mess than a cutting oil. But I've broken a lot of bits doing, and I'm not a knife maker, but I've broken my fair share of bits on in and out of stuff. Okay. So we talked about this annealing. So you're going to heat the material up slightly above critical temperature and hold it. And now the $50 question, how long? I'd say till it's thoroughly the same color, and you with some of the, like, you put a hunk of steel in your forge, you can tell the outside's getting hot and the inside's not. As soon as you say move it out to change something, all of a sudden you can just see the dark coldness of the center working its way to the outside. So yeah, I don't know how to modulate this. I was playing with mine the other day, and I think what I need to do, or what I'm going to try to do, because I have an ANSI tool forge, which is this one too. Matter of fact, it's like this, 3 burner, but it's a low boy, so it's like here. But I even called him last week to say, hey, I'm trying to anneal some steel using this baby right here. I can't get my temperatures down low enough. I started out okay. I just had my ball valve just cracked, and I played with tank regulator pressures. I don't think you're really supposed to throttle here. This should be probably wide open, and you use your regulator. And so this thing was huffing and puffing, so it was, you know, kind of cutting out. It's like, well, I could keep it at black heat.
What did it sound like?
So I was down here, and I could measure it with the IR thing. I was down in this region, but I needed to be up in this region and up in this region. And so I was like, okay, I'm good. I let it sit there for like 30 minutes just cooking. I was like, okay, I'm here and I'm steady. So let's just bump that gas open a little, tink. I mean, I didn't move. Ball valve is not a flow control device by any chance, anyway. But anyway, I minutely moved the valve. And then I went on and did something else, came back. I'm up here. Ruined it. So this is a big old pin, you know, I found during construction out of the plant. It was like a caterpillar pin to drag a piece of equipment with a, you know, trailer hitch. And I found it in the gravel. I was like, I know where that's going. But now I've taken it clear up here and back down again, so it looks very toasted. All right. So the point of all this was you want to keep your annealing temperatures as low as possible to prevent that grain growth diagram that we showed early on, where if you take it up here and let it cool off, you have larger grains. Well, you want smaller grains. So that pin that I was trying to do, I was just trying to sneak up on it, up, sneak up, don't come down on it, you're gonna go up. And it went from here to here. So what I had, what I have plans for that hunk of steel doesn't require high-tech hardening or anything, but kind of ruined my day.
So how are you gonna fix your grain size?
I'm not, I can't. Once it's there, you're done. But what I was gonna, this thing's got an inch and, what is it, 2 and 11, no, it's inch and 15/16 diameter, I think this pin is, and it's about that long. And I thought, oh, what I want to do is slice this thing to make like little cookies, and then I wanted to make one of those adjustable scrolling jigs where you have the angle iron and you have the 2 different size things, and I thought, yeah, I'll do that. So I had the smaller diameter sizes, and I went to go cut that piece of pin for the larger diameter size, and took it to my bandsaw, zip, cut it off, zip, cut it off, wouldn't scratch. So the very, so the pin's this long, I could cut that on my bandsaw, cut that on my bandsaw, so that was like waste cut because this had a taper on it. Cut one like little cookie out, wafer. Next one, took the teeth right off my bandsaw blade. This is not good. And I mentioned it to Bruce, and he said, "Oh, don't do that. Don't do that." He says, "You need to use these 3M Cubitron grinding wheels for your angle grinder." Okay, so I ordered a couple. Zip, went right through it. Then I thought, what I should do is just anneal this thing, get it all soft, then I can put it in the bandsaw. So that was what I was trying to do, is just anneal it and get it softened up where I could use it on my bandsaw, because the first inch, but he was familiar with that when I described it to him. He says, "Oh, those things work harden after time. Those things will really get hard." He was correct. They are. Okay, so the general rule is to anneal after forging, but I will say, check the manufacturer. So you can go to, if you're using virgin material and you know what it is, you can go to their website and they'll have heat treat documents, and they'll some of this stuff, when I was looking at it, I think it was in the H variety. Could be wrong, don't quote me on that. Anyway, there's really a lot of complications on the annealing. Take it up to this temperature, let it cool off. Take it up to that temperature, let it cool off. Take it up to this temperature, let it, now you can actually do something with it. So if you're using new material and you know what it is, I check with the manufacturer before you just start getting frisky with it. Yeah, I don't know if you guys want to, you can run your finger around on those files and it's going to get a sense of what they are. Okay, we talked about hardening the steel quickly to trap that carbon in there. So that's about getting it above its magnetic temperature down to below magnetic temperature. And as was discussed earlier, when you're quenching something, you're, when you quench something, you set up boiling right on the surface. So also referred to nucleate boiling. So you get a steam pocket. So the steam pocket is not conveying heat away because water's not touching it. So you need to swirl this thing around. And I noticed again, on some of the tool heat treat recipes, it'll say, dunk it in straight, don't swirl it. Just dunk it in straight and keep agitating it like this. So again, if you know your steel, if it's a little bit exotic, check, see what you can find out about it. But mainly, it's to prevent that nucleate boiling. And I had a piece of boiler tube that I wanted to bring, but I could not find it from the wee old days where, your firewall's made of tubes about A diameter, and they have a spiral, and they're rifled just like a gun barrel. And it minimizes the nucleate boiling, so the steam bubbles are being conveyed up to the steam drum. And I thought that might be something interesting for you guys to look at, but I couldn't. I think it's stashed away in a really good hiding spot. Yeah, probably. Okay, we talked about quenching on a rising heat, so that's important. So if you're, again, especially with forging, it's easier to control. You got to be patient, and one of the phrases in instrumentation is TTT, temperature takes time. So you keep, okay, let it set for 20 minutes, let it set for 30 minutes, and just keep inching your way up, because it's real easy to overdo it on a coal fire. Oh yeah, cool. So back to this. So what I'm planning on doing next is throttling the air through these inputs to see if I can have a solid combustion but lower temperature in the forge box. That's my plan. I don't know if anybody's ever tried that without blowing themselves up. So there's a delicate balance in the combustion technology when you have a flame, natural gas or propane flame. You've got the speed of propagation of the fire coming out, and in this case we've got, try not to pinch my finger. So that flow of gas is creating a venturi to suck air, combustion air in, mix, combust down here. So by disrupting the flow, the ratios of air to fuel here might totally not work. So that's, I think what George was talking about, may not work at all. But I thought, well, give it a try, because I know what doesn't work. And that's what, I keep going back to. If you're not breaking, you're not making. So you just, even though I got to tell you, I was very disappointed in a lot of things I did, because it's spent a lot of time trying to forge something and then burn it up accidentally, lose it in the forge, not heat treat it right. But you just got to keep trying. Yeah, so another point about heating on the way up is rotate your piece. So if it's in the forge, just keep rotating it, because these burners, there's 3 distinct burners in this one. So there's going to be, quite possibly cold spots between those flames. So you need to in, out, rotate 180, 90, just keep it going to like a rotisserie in there so you get an even heat. Okay. So quenching, what I wanted to demonstrate also today was a water quench, just so you can see what happens with the surface of the item in the water, about that boiling, and why you want to be swishing that thing around to get it cooled, because you want your part to be cooled as rapidly as possible, because it's about the time, it's the rate of change. It's not just getting from here to here, because you could put it in vermiculite. If it slowly cools, it's going to be soft. So you have to just, or I should say this, slowly cools with time, it's going to be soft. But it's the rate of change that captures that carbon in the little molecule. So you've got to get it from here to there as fast as possible to get it hard. So there's a brine solution, and so in the list of quenching media, by the fastest is brine, so that's salt water, and Rob Gunther, I think it is, he developed this thing called super quench. So it's basically tap water, salt, so many pounds of salt, Dawn dishwashing liquid, which acts like a surfactant in the water to help things get wetted, and Shackley product, Shackley Basic One, and I've heard this since the 80s. So I thought, what is Shackley One? What is this? I never, besides getting in the pyramid selling scheme, what else? That might be important to me. So I tried looking it up. Well, they don't make that anymore because it's got sodium hydroxide or caustic in it. Well, that's the reason they made this super quench, because blacksmiths of the old days were using sodium hydroxide and acid, or not acid, sodium hydroxide, which is caustic, the other end, and that's very dangerous. You don't want to be splashing that stuff around. So now they just put it in other products. So it was like, okay, well, what replaced it? Okay, they're up to so-and-so model, and then I looked at the list of ingredients on the very bottom, sodium hydroxide. So it's got some green tinge to it, but still might burn you. Okay, so then plain old water's next. Then warm water. So if you don't want it to quench as fast, you can put warm water in your tank, or take up, you heat a piece of steel and you put it in your water tank, depending on how big it is, and try to pre-warm the water. Warm oil. See, Bruce, I don't know if this is a Gill thing or his thing, but he's had this oil quench tank here with snuffer. And the other thing I wanted to do, originally had thought of doing, was take another vessel like this, fill it with a canola oil, so you can see what it looks like. Does it look any different between water quench and oil quench? But it's too dangerous. So this canola oil here is got a flash point of 650, I think. And actually, I wrote that down here. And yeah, so its flash point is 619, but so that's when it combusts. Okay, so smoke, its smoking point is 400 to 475, 400 to 475. So when you're cooking something, you're picking an oil that has a smoke point above what you plan on your cooking temperature, because you don't want to burn oil taste in your food. So you pick an oil higher than what you plan on cooking at. But seldom, and this is a term that keeps getting thrown around, they'll talk about smoke point, but they won't tell you flash point. But you'll see a number like 600 degrees. Well, that's not smoke point. That's for cooking oils. That's going to be a flash point. So it's actually going to combust. And the problem is, if let's say you have let's just say, for example, you have let's use this. You have a tool and you want this third hardened, and you're gonna dunk it in your quench. Well, if this was red heat to start with, red heat is, 1,000 degrees and up. So if you're dunking that in oil, and even if you're swishing it around, you're creating vapors, and that's gonna, temperature there is above 600, and that's gonna ignite those vapors, and boom, you're gonna have a big old fireball coming up on you.
That's what we're seeing, like in Fortune Fire, when they quench and then
Yeah.
bring the fireball up?
That's part of the show.
Yeah. Yeah. So, this is what I'm saying. Exactly. So when I make skillets, I use avocado oil because it's got the highest smoke point of all the oils, and it's a food grade type oil. So instead of, when I make forge skillets, so they're just carbon steel, 10 gauge, but when I want to season the skillet, it's not so cast iron, what normal, like you might be thinking of, it's very porous. So now you're using oils, grease, lard, whatever to season those things. Well, when I make a skillet, it's out of sheet stock, so it's a piece of plate basically. So there's no pores in it. Well, I want to season that so still you don't stick your food to it and it doesn't rust. So I use avocado oil, which is the highest smoke point of all food oils, and it's like 500 degrees. So 550, I want to say, but it could be higher. But so you take get done forging the skillet, I clean it, I throw it in my wife's oven, pull it out, start sloshing her down with avocado oil.
Where do you get that?
Grocery store. Not all grocery stores carry it, but I think I found it at Wig. Yeah. 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 So. Okay, so also if you get into higher carbon steel, sometimes the rapid quench is too much for it. So that's where you might need to slow down that rate of change. So maybe instead you use water, you make a little test piece, you use water, tink, hit it with a hammer, it shatters. Okay, I need to do something softer, try oil. Oil conveys the heat away at a slower rate, so that drop in temperature from here to there is a little bit slower. So now what can happen is the outer perimeter of your tool or steel is softer than, the outer will cool faster, so it'll be harder. The core has got the heat for a little bit longer time, so it's a little softer. So the more carbon. Yeah, good point. Does the carbon drop out of it? I don't know. I have to find that out. But the core would be softer because you're at a higher heat for a longer period of time when you're quenching. Okay, so again, experience is the teacher. All right, now we're going to talk about tempering. So now we've got it, we annealed it, we forged it, we hardened it, but now we need to soften it down some so it'll be tougher. And things I read here were it should be tempered as soon as possible after hardening, so just so that you don't accidentally drop your piece on the ground that's happened to me a couple times actually. I was put a lot of work into something, and now I hardened it. I was just like, oh, thank God, everything worked. Nothing cracked. It worked good. I'm so happy. Walk over to where the tempering is. Tink. Oh, shit. Yeah, I just knew it was going to break in half, but it didn't. But it could happen. It could happen. So you want to temper as soon as possible. Now, again, temper needs to be drawn by its duty. So page 25, if you wouldn't mind. So when we're tempering, as temperatures go up, you know, we'll start with a color scale of yellows, then straw, bronze, blue, purple, so forth, down to dark blue. So a friend of mine asked me to heat treat his brick hammer years ago. And I was like, oh, yeah, no problem. So I go to my little chart here, and, you know, I thought I was supposed to, you know, by this, I thought, oh, I should be in the purple range. I go through the machine, I do that, I do this, give it back to him. I was very happy with my work. He wanted it to be, the hammer to have a fishtail on it. So you know, Mason's hammer has a real kind of like narrow peen back here. He wanted that peen to be a fishtail so he could have a wider striking zone, but you know, narrow in striking contact, but wider in area. I was real happy with that. A couple years later, hey, how'd that hammer work out? Too soft. Oh, you want me to do it again? No. Okay. Sorry. You know, so you've got, you know, it's not, yeah. It should have been up here, I guess, apparently. Or I didn't quench it long enough, or I don't know, temper colors were there, but too soft for his work. Okay. All right, see page, okay, we got that. And also in the back here, around 60, '69A, there's a temper color chart. Again, so like this anvilfire.com, that's a site Jock Dempsey had, and I believe he's passed away, but the site's still active. So I don't know if, and I saw copyright 2024 down there, so I don't know if somebody's maintaining it for him or what it is, but there's information is out there, and that's a go-to place. All right, and then I talked about it, the little toaster oven over there. So this works surprisingly well. You can wrap your piece up in a piece of foil also for trying to get even temperatures and slide it in there. It's cheap. You can buy them at the Goodwill store for next to nothing. Except they look fancier than that. Okay, all right, so junkyard steels. So this, we're up to page 30. Oh, wait a minute, if you wouldn't back up one page, there's something there. Okay, so we talked about the annealing method. So you got vermiculite, perlite, wood ash, and lime. They're easy to get to and cheap. Heat treating systems, you know, Kohler propane forge, although personally I can't control the propane forge down where I want it to be. You can use oxyacetylene, I use that for years and years and years. MAP gas and propane torch can work. The old toaster oven for tempering. But again, if you're going to get real super serious, commercial heat treat ovens are probably the way to go. Okay, if you advance one page, please. All right, so this yeah, compiled from a lot of different sources. I forget what I can't remember if that's, I can't read it from here, but CBA maybe. Forgot who gets the North Texas Blacksmith Association, but it was compiled from Machinery's Handbook, Edge of the Anvil, several different sources. So first, so what are your tools? You know, you've got a magnet. Whoops, that's not a magnet. You've got a magnet. So that can tell you, okay, I know I have iron in it. What about that one? And I gotta say, this got me in my little box of miscellaneous tools, junkyard steels. I'm pulling stuff out. Oh, this could be good, that could be good, that could be good, that could be, these look good. Pull them out. Well, now I gotta wash them because my shop had flooded some time back, and a lot of the steels were just rusted up. And anyway, put them in a 30% pickling bath, vinegar bath. If you can, they sell it, it's $25 for a gallon at Lowe's of 30% vinegar, and which is pretty darn strong. And 24 hours, it'll take the rust off of pretty much anything. That and a toothbrush. But I thought I had some. Oh, these are nice tool shapes. Scrub, scrub, scrub. Pure brass, brass drift that I lost, I don't know how many years ago. I was like, oh shit, I've been looking for that for years. So you don't, just because it's dark color doesn't mean it's steel. And we'll talk about, I want to do a little copper experiment too. So anyway.
Try the white bar.
The white bar. Oh, nothing there. How about, stainless steel? So 300 class stainless, not magnetic. 400, yes. Good. So just because it's magnetic doesn't mean it's carbon steel. So, now I thought, wasn't sure what, this is an exhaust valve out of something I worked on, but I thought that might be stainless and it might be a 400 series. I don't know, but certainly is magnetic. So anyway, this is a magnet's your friend. You ought to get one. We're going to do spark test. So you'll be referring back here to page 223, or wait, sorry. Page 72A. So you can check for hardenability. So what do you have at your devices to test your steel? You got the magnet, you've got a spark test, the hardenability, unless you've got a little file system that's cheap. That's a good way to do it. You can use a center punch once you kind of get yourself calibrated. Now you have your little assortment, and you just try to use the same striking. Does that feel good? Tink. And so forth and so forth. Yeah, sorry. Third down right column. Yeah. Okay. Also, I keep this laminated out in my shop. And what you really have to do is calibrate yourself. So if the more carbon you have, the longer these feathers start growing, and the more little side sparklers. So I think I just said that backwards. So wrought iron has no carbon in it, so it has no little feathers or sparklers. So as you increase carbon, you get more of these little secondary and tertiary sparklers. So there's a good tertiary one. You got a primary, you go to the secondary, that one, then a third comes off of it. So as you start getting higher in carbon, the more complex it becomes. And then stainless steel does have carbon in it, but typically 0.3, 0.4 depends. S5 steel, how do you tell this from that? This is where hopefully you have some known steel, and I have known people, they take, you know, okay, now once you're calibrated, they have a little piece of wrought iron. They mark it wrought, and it's on a nail. Now as you start developing your little stash of steels that you know what they are, you put a little piece of that above, like on your grinding board, that's your reference. So now you have your unknown junkyard steel, grind. Try this. Well, maybe. So it's a visual thing and it's a subjective thing, but unless you got a met lab somewhere. And speaking of metallurgical labs, the hardenability of something and the tensile strength of something be nice to know, but more than likely you're not don't have that type of equipment. And
What colors are these sparks?
they are typically orange to yellow. Yeah.
Wait till you see the titanium. Wait till you see the titanium.
Yeah. So a sample of titanium was brought in, which is this material. Oh yeah. So it's non-magnetic. Also, that can catch fire too. So, any words of wisdom on that? Okay to grind it, or okay?
You're doing a little bit, you're not doing massive amounts.
All right. And the other thing to keep mind of is, whatever you've ground on the wheel is embedded in the wheel. So you may be transferring materials in the wheel, so that could affect your test or your visual test. So just because it may look like something to you today, but 6 weeks from now it may not look that way because you've got polluted your carbon wheel. You can use hand grinders, which kind of sometimes is easier because you can shoot your sparks out that way and look at them instead of down this way and look at them. And I took the tool rest off of this so we could maybe hopefully see that better. And I wasn't sure if you guys are in practice of it, but with your grinders, if you use them, you can put a 5-gallon bucket of water below them and put a squirt of Dawn dishwashing liquid, which is a surfactant. So now your grinding miff that comes off your tool will go in the water, but that thin layer of soap won't allow the spark to kind of ricochet back out of there, so it like captures it in the water. So you can just watch your little particles, grit particles and steel particles, kind of fall to the bottom, and then it's easier to keep the dust down in your shop. Okay. Okay, we talked about stainless and copper. We're going to talk about, so copper has no carbon in it, and it behaves differently. So with steel, if we anneal it, we take it up to this temperature here and we cool it off slowly, which relaxes all the stresses, and it becomes soft. Copper can be worked down in this lower, just visible red area here, and let it, or I should say, with copper, let's say you're forging it, you're working it. So you're forging this into something. Now, the more you hit it, the harder it gets, and the harder, and pretty soon your elbows are going to tell you, I need to soften this thing before I crack something here. So you'll take it up in the lower red heat region and then let it air cool, and it softens. So steel and copper work in the same way, where you're taking it up in its heat range and letting it cool down slowly, it'll soften. But unlike steel, you take it up its red region and now you quench it in water, it also gets soft. So it gets as soft as if you let it slowly cool off, or as if you rapidly cool it off, where steel slowly makes soft, rapid makes hard. Now, one thing with copper,
Ferrous versus non-ferrous.
yes, yeah. So one little danger with copper too, boy, I'm thinking about it here, is let's say this thing's, you've been forging away on this thing, so you've been in your forge, you've been hammering the heck out of it, so you're getting fire scale all over it. One way to let me scratch that, let me back up. You've been hammering on it, so it's hardened. You put it in the forge with the purpose of annealing it, you get it red hot, you stick it in your water, what's going to happen? That's right, this becomes a steam jet, so don't be looking over your water tank when you stick that thing in there. You'll get a shot of hot water right in your face, so you want to aim it elsewhere. But the benefit of doing the quench in water is the fire scale will bust off this, so the copper will shrink and the fire scale doesn't, and it comes off easier. Now you can take this and put it over in your pickle solution, which is a mild acid, and now it'll eat away the rest of that fire scale. You can take a little brush and scrub it off, and it's pink. The copper now comes to be a clean pink looking. Now you can forge it, because if you leave the black fire scale on, you're going to be beating it into the surface of the copper, so you don't want that. Well, or maybe you do want it for an effect, but okay. Really, the rest of just want to bring your attention to the appendices and the listed in the front that have more information in them. We're not going to go over. There's a lot of the anvil fire. The guy they call him the guru, and there's a lot of Q&A about heat treating and tempering, which I've included in here. And you just have to kind of get to that appendix and then just start reading through comments. There's a lot of good information in there, and it could help you with a problem. Okay. Talked about that. Yep. Okay. Time to practice. So we're going to first do some grinding. I don't know if you guys need a bio break, or am I going too long? You guys ready to run for it? Keep on going? Keep on trucking? All right. All right, so okay, so we want a calibrated observer, or do you just want to just kind of get the idea and do your own testing? Okay, so first is wrought iron, no carbon. Don't know if this is going to work. Let's see. Okay, so no flares to speak of. No secondary sparking. Okay, we're going to go up to, this is hot roll, so that's like a 0.2. So you're just seeing, just right at the end of that sparkler, you see a little poof. Okay. All right, so this is a HC railroad spike, so HC means high carbon. They're like 0.3 to 0.4. Okay, so you've got more, the higher the carbon, the more combustible materials out there to be ignited. So does that look like a picture by any chance? 1040, 1040 would be close to it. Yeah, let's see. All All right, now this is an axle shaft, which by the charts might be 1040, so let's see how that looks. I'd say there's more carbon than the... So some of those, they get out there and then it's like a little firework on a firework and it explodes. All right, now this is 4140, which is a chrome alloy, but 0.4. So not much, as much iron. So it kind of looks, does it look like that? No. Those actually shoot out farther. Let's see. So something for your sample board. That's the whole thing of the mystery sparks, is being able to see it and then replicate it later to have some sort of visual comparison on. All right, this is the guaranteed 5160. So 51 chrome moly, I think it was, and 0.6% carbon. How's that compared to this? Yeah, so definitely more sparks on 1040. So the chrome alloy in 41, and I'm not sure what 51 is, but maybe you can check your book there. But see which end it ground off already. So I don't take both numbers off. Yeah. All right, so mystery steel, which I think is a car, which I know is a car spring. I just don't remember which car got it off of. So longer feathers, but less sparkies. Not as dramatic. So I'd have to say that doesn't have that much carbon. What's that?
It looks like closer to 1020.
Okay. Let's try that. Yep. Yep. Okay, so this is some leaf spring material. Could be 1085 or could be 5160, but what I'd have to say is with the alloys, with the chromium types, the sparks are less dynamic, right? Less, yeah. So I'd say a brighter color. Yep. So let's see. Let's go back to 5160 known. See which end I'm grinding off. Grinding my number off. Yeah, about the same. About the same. I'd say that's the 5160. So my known car spring, my unknown car spring, who knows? So I'd have to say this is not 5160. So it's definitely more. Yeah, so I'll put that back down. So I have to check the charts and see, because usually there'll be a couple choices. Oh, did it come off a car? Did it come off a truck? Did it this, that? And that one chart's not the world of information either. It's, there's lots of places. Okay, this is a spring rake, a tooth of a spring, a hay rake. That's pretty sparky. That's pretty good. Okay, let's see here. All right.
I just brought in a couple pieces of cable for the raffle. Can we try that? Because I'm very interested to see what
Sure.
that is. It's first retrieving cable.
Ooh. That's some heavy duty stuff. All right. Whoa! 4th of July. Put in your tickets for this stuff, guys. Right. Let's see here. I wanted to try this exhaust valve. Sometimes the stems are different, and the seats, if you get to the valve seat, that's a different material than the valve body. Not too many sparkies. So this was magnetic, and one source told me that was stainless, so that maybe it's a 400 grade. Definitely not much carbon in it. All right, this is, let's see. Oh, this is, yeah. So this was something I actually want to pass around here, because when I looked up bandsaw blades, kind of shooting straight out without secondaries. Don't know. But what I wanted to point out about this thing is, when I looked it up, I've got it written down over there what they typically make this stuff out of, but they also just make the teeth out of high-speed steel and then weld it to this backing.
I've also seen some of the blades they make closer to a 15 and 20.
Oh.
Some blades.
Oh, okay.
So
So,
that might have something to do with the spark content with the nickel, higher nickel content.
okay, good.
But you have a 15 and 20 sample?
Yes, uh-huh.
Well, that's-
And the other, I was going to pass this around, but if you do look where that line is, you can see where the weld is. You just kind of glint the light off of there. There's a different color of the teeth versus the band here.
Wanna try sparking the teeth?
Okay. All right, so let's see. All right. So here's some 1095. And this is known 1095. So a lot of sparklers and sparks and sparklers, I guess. Yeah, okay, so now here's a 15 and 20. Okay, let's go back with a bandsaw here. A little brighter color on the bandsaw blade. Now this test also might mention. So You want to try to be consistent with your pressure. Beware about contaminants in the wheel, and the cross section of this is different than the cross section of that, so making those match it would be ideal, but take what you can get. All right, so that's the nickel, high nickel, low carbon. Okay. All right, so these are just used bearings, which I looked up, went to the manufacturer. High carbon steel. What? I went to this manufacturer. Carbon steel race. Wouldn't even say what anything else was out of it. But, so you may not be able to go to the manufacturer and figure it all out. So let's try the roller bearing. Is it magnetic? Yep. Who knows? That's why it's mystery steel. Different than this. More of a dull orangey color. Maybe not. Could be. Okay, so we did all those. Okay, here's a farrier's rasp. All I could find could be 1095. Lots of spark. So when they do the little sunburst, they really had some long dandelions, spores coming out of those. So that's 0.9.
Some railroad spikes. I don't know, sometimes they have like, someone's got
Yeah.
MC on the thing.
Okay.
I'm gonna try to show us what a rib.
Okay, these are both MCs. Okay, so now this is an HC. Definitely more carbon in the HC.
And there's really no knowing what gets it from a regular to an HC, right?
In some of the notes in there, it'll say, the HC is 30 to 40 point,
Okay.
so 30 to 40 percentage points of carbon. Yeah.
So it is something more, and that's why they put it on the curve of the track, I think, what I've heard.
Don't know, but sounds good.
Jackhammer.
Okay, jackhammer. So this may or may not be S5, I don't know. So definitely, yeah, a lot of spark. So S5 is up there on the chart. Does it sort with this? So, all right, here's S7. Not too many sparkies. So this is known. This is a known S7. So here's a W1. So shorter, but a lot of action. So that's water quenchable.
You have an O1 there?
I didn't have an O1, yeah. I thought I did. I was like, I found some blanks and I thought, that's when I realized, why didn't I stamp these things? All right, so here's some 300 stainless. It's a dud. So yeah, I don't know if you guys work with stainless much, but what you don't want to do is if you're using an angle grinder, you do not want to grind carbon steel and then take that same wheel and go over on a stainless, because it'll embed the carbon into this and then you'll have rust stains. Okay, here's some 409. So we know it's magnetic. It's a dud. It's a bigger dud than 300. Yeah, same. Maybe a couple more sparks. Oh, can't really see.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too, burn out and.
Okay. All right, so now we got the mystery steels, and we got so I will say I made these punches, these chisels and punches out of something found, and they've been working great. But I also have some chisels I made out of something found that not working great. All right. Okay, so here's a. Woo! Wow, that's pretty impressive. So you get, especially when the leader goes out and then it'll. Wow,
Some of those points on the camera, I can see where it sparkles, like almost 8 to 10 points coming out. I mean, that's amazing.
yeah, that looks like the North Star in A Christmas Story, right? Yeah. All right, so here's some unknown. It's unknown to me now, but it was known at one time. That's pretty high. Yep. Could explain why it's worked. Okay. All right, here's a punch. I want to say these are in the S class, but I don't know for sure. So here's some S7. Those 3 steel. I could say that's the same. Might be a different type of S. It's, what's that?
They look pretty close.
Yeah. I think this is the same material here. Yeah. Okay. I think we covered that, everything there. Think so. Anything else you want to see again, just for yucks? Okay. All right, so I'm gonna heat up a piece of metal. Are you guys burned out? Burned out on sparks?
What do you think it iron?
Because you said you had a couple of different ways of the temperature, so if we could see those tools in action maybe?
Okay. Yeah, let's.
Yeah. Light them all up.
It's a little easy.
George, come around and I'll sell some tickets while we're waiting.
I want your money.
Yeah, well, my $1. I think it's on the counter over there.
It's in a little cup.
It's a little cup.
Back. Everybody back that wants to be back? Okay, we're ready. All right. Yeah, we're ready to wrap it up here. Okay, so what we've got, all that's left to do here is, I forgot to tell you about these Temple sticks. So Temple, this company, makes these markers that melt at a certain temperature. And this is a 1400 degree one, 950, 350. So, you know, more common uses are if you're using you need to preheat something to weld it, you can use these markers. So you pull your steel out, you mark it like a crayon. If it melts, then you're above this temperature. And what I will say, these are about 25 bucks a piece. But what I learned the hard way is they're hygroscopic. So even though I put them in a Ziploc bag out in my shop, which is unheated space, moisture got in here and ruined them all. So next step is I'm going to use my wife's vacuum sealer, because I don't use them that often, so why waste them? So I'm just going to put them in a vacuum bag and have her suck it down, and then I can leave it out in the shop, and when I need it, I should be alive.
Just order some of those silica bags and then drop them in a mason jar.
Yeah, that would work.
There's no cap on top of it?
No. Yeah. Mm-mm. Okay, so Temple makes these. They're in the back of your book. There's a list of all the model numbers for the different temperature ranges. They're an affordable, fairly affordable. So what we're gonna do here is pull this piece of steel out. Maybe one of you guys give a visual indication of temperature based on that chart there. And let's see, who's got trigger finger? Okay, I'll do the trigger finger here. Then we've got a thermocouple, which is a type of instrumentation wire. When you touch your material, it'll give you a readout of the temperature. That's like a $200 item right now and on eBay you can probably get them for dirt cheap. I'm not even sure that, anyway, these are 73 bucks from Chinesium. And that FLIR, which is the forward-looking infrared cameras, you're above 20 grand on one of those things. So this exercise was about how your eye versus that chart versus fluorescent, how, 3 different types of measurement. And when you go to these measurements, this device, if you're going to buy one, make sure, like this one goes to 2,700 degrees. So you want to be up, you want to be up in the orange range minimum of whatever instrument that if you wanted to buy one, beware it could go off scale. The fancy schmancy one there high end is 932 degrees. And you got to select the scale to get up there, so it's not, you know, normally they're lower temps. So everything has its limitation, including your eyeballs. But guess what we all have is eyeballs and a color chart. And all right.
Let's take a guess on, Kevin, let's take a guess on what it is, and then we'll do the reuse.
Okay. So here's a 1400 degree marker. That's melting. Not, kind of melting.
14, no
So
problem.
we're probably in,
What do you think, Tom?
I'm
Right there.
thinking 22, this is 22 for that color one.
Yep.
Use the back of your hand, Bobby. Use that.
All right, I measured 20. Whoop.
You're off scale for you, buddy.
Do it this way. 1300 degrees,
All right, what's on the other one? What's your?
945.
It's off scale for
Did you
you.
have the other one on there?
Yeah, so I guess this is the illustrating point is, and right, exactly, and it's cooling off as rapidly. So what color on the color chart is 1400?
1400 would be in
Reddish. Okay, so not smoking, but it's not super melting. So it could be over 14. Come on. Should put my lock on this thing. 1,000 and dropping, 1,100. Okay, so anyway, that's the point is you have to train your own eye against that color, against your backdrop, your shop. You know, a lot of places I've seen do, you know, make sure your shop is dim. So I went through the exercise shooting many times. Turn off the shop lights, put up stuff over the windows, do this, do that. It's all helpful to know. You know, but can you discipline yourself to do it every time?
This seems like the hardest one,
Yeah,
you know, with the dots on it, to try to do it.
yeah.
Um,
And if you're doing,
That's because
Yep.
you drink too much.
here, I want to take those from you. Okay. All right, so,
You gonna put it back in the forge or you gonna
yeah,
straight wire?
yeah, I'll okay. So we're going to,
Touch the red button.
now this is, you know, tin, this is hot roll. It's not really going to harden in the true sense.
That made earlier, like how high does that go?
I think it can go up to 3,000.
3,000.
Yeah, but what's better than just wire switch? I mean, so the two, like the yellow wires, chrome-L, and the red wires, alu-Mil, you turn them together, and that junction gives a voltage per degree, whatever, and then that calibrator converts that millivolt to a displayed output for that wire. So sometimes they make, you know, they make a probe that looks like a thermometer almost like that. So now you can actually stick it on something instead of, you know, we're kind of wobbling around with a wire and we're, you know, it's not that great, but I guess the point I'm trying to make is everything has its purpose, and you can have the fanciest schmanciest thing in the world, but it's sometimes no better than your eyeball. All right, so, okay, so this is what so according to our chart, we need to get up, yeah, let's do this test. So mag, so something like 1350 we have to get above before that loses magnetism. But this is 0.2 carbon, so we're at the left-hand end of the range there.
What's this next exercise?
So we're gonna check it with, we're gonna see when it becomes non-magnetic. That'll tell us when it's in its upper transportation.
A1? Is that A1 to lose the magnetism?
Yeah, A1 steel is magnetic.
Still magnetic, okay.
Magnetic point at 1400. Stainless steel is not magnetic above 800.
Okay, so I'd call that orange heat. That's non-mag. That's cherry red, my eye, right there. That's magnetic. That tip is non-magnetic. So you can also see how, yeah. Let's just, I mean, it's already magnetic.
Yeah.
Now I can feel it. Oop.
And then right underneath it, it still sticks.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
this is all total. All right, so let's do that one more time. And
That's at 1400 to lose.
So we're looking at non-magnetic.
okay, so this is 0.2% carbon. So non-magnetic, starting at 1400, but it could go up to 1700 before it's totally non-magnetic.
14 to 17.
So
14 to 17.
So there's what I would call orange heat or salmon. I'd call that salmon. That's non-magnetic. That's non-magnetic. Upper, that's a cherry color. That's magnetic right there. Okay. So now, you can see the bubbles forming around that. All right, let's go do it again.
We need to do it again, we can get it on video.
All right. Okay, so let's
Down and up. Bubbles flowing out, like, Galileo, get up, get down, get back up. If you can. See right through it, like a magician trick.
That's how you make your money big.
That's how you make it better. Yeah, now. Alright, get your cameras ready.
All right. I got a cold spot right there. It's hot, cold, hot. All right, so when we go to the quench, you're going to be watching that film of bubbles around. right, so part of the, okay, ready? Ready?
Go, go, go.
So that's why you want to be swirling this stuff.
And that's how you make a hot toddy.
Well, okay, let's do one more experiment here.
Gotta make that copper,
So maybe I'm
something like that. That's what we need to have.
All right, so this is going to be a water quenchable steel. Not sure what. So again, you want to quench on rising heat. You want to keep rotating your part around. Get it even as much as possible. Okay. All right, get about there. All right, this is a piece of W1, water quenchable. Okay, so magnetic, non-mag, non-mag. Ready? All right, so now when that thing, you keep it in your quench until all color goes out. All right, now let's see if we can. Well, you need to polish this, but you can. Here's an example of the temper colors. You've got straw down here, bronze, purple, blue. But when you're making a tool, the heat that's back here from the forge, once you you get it out of the fire, you can hit that with a wire wheel or your grinder. And that'll be a polished surface. Then you can watch these temperatures in reverse going that way. Yeah, okay. All right, last experiment. All right, so hard copper, right? Now I want to save my books. Try not to.
closest there, buddy. I'll stand behind you like that.
Now, is it gonna, are we having the splash pad? So that I want
Hey, you want these so you can lay from the side?
Oh, okay,
'Cause right now it's got,
Yeah.
it's coming at you, so.
right. Eh, a little too small. Need a little
Well, I mean,
smaller.
when you,
Oh, yeah.
When you
Right,
put
right,
it
right, right. See these. Okay, so the warning again. Hot water is going to come jetting out of this pipe. All right, so you see the fumes, copper's burning off of that. All right.
Which way you pointing that thing?
Okay, so now you can see a lot of fire scale broke off. You see the black flecks down in here. There is some left on here, but now you can basically take a toothbrush, put this in your pickle solution in a little brush, and it'll be pink, bright pink copper. But the point is, man, soft. So with steel, you quench it, it gets hard. Copper, you quench it, it gets soft. Steel, you let it air harden, or you anneal it and let it cool down to air temperature, it'll get soft. But of steel, you rapidly quench it, it gets hard. Copper, it gets soft no matter which way you do it. So the advantage of doing it hot, quick quench, is that this fire scale blows off it, and now you put it in a pickle and you can brush it, it'll just be pink like that, and now you can forge your part, your whatever, and you just keep working it until it gets so hard that you are afraid you're going to start cracking.
And that's also the same for brass.
And aluminum too.
Brass,
Say that.
Brass,
Brass, yeah.
brass.
brass you take until it's cherry red, and then let it cool it in by air.
Okay.
Some brass that I've worked with.
All right.
I've never went to brass.
All right. Actually, next.
I think it works the same way. I've done that.
I just remember it going cherry red.
Yeah. Yes.
So,
It running like 400 degrees hot, 500 degrees higher than 1907.
putting the pens in
Hey, can you get the light switches right up there?
and then quenching them water. and then it
Okay.
comes out.
So that's the
When you
way
put
to,
your pen
that
in,
way,
you
after
can
you do that,
clean it in and
that's gonna be the cleanest or the shiniest, whatever, that the copper will be.
Yeah. Actually, this is a good start. The next step is putting it in a pickle solution.
Right.
And then, those candlesticks I made last month, I think one I left them in there for, as short as 30 minutes, as long as 2 hours. Depends on how much fire scale you got. And then you pull it out and you just brush that off, rinse it in cold, just rinse it in water so you don't leave the pickle on there. And then, so if you're doing two things at once, you just keep rotating. But
I mean, when you heat it back up again, no more, there won't be any more scale? If you've removed it off, or there will always be?
You'll burn it again.
yeah,
You'll
yeah,
burn it
yeah.
again.
So the next time you put it in, yeah, right. So the next time you go up in heat, you'll get the scale.
But
Then you
if
quench.
you wanted to do it cold after that, that's the way to go, you could do it also.
Yes.
Because you're all clean on that.
Yes. So the thing is, you don't want to. You don't necessarily want to pound your scale in the copper because getting it out is not going to happen. So it always has some black flecks
So
in
get
it.
some off, then do yours, and then get your scale off and continue
But you
this.
normally
Yeah.
don't do the pickling till the end, right?
Well, again, it's how clean do you want it? I wanted those candlesticks squeaky clean. So work, heat, quench, pickle, work, heat. So as you're hammering it, it gets hard. And there's not a way to make it hard otherwise than from working, yeah, that I know of.
It's just a ferrous versus non-ferrous. Steel versus copper, aluminum and brass is in the best.
Okay, so that's it for today. Sorry I kept you long, but.
Thank you.
And appreciate your contributions.
Sure. Thanks for printing those out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's not real great.
Yeah, and that's something I would